Hi guys, this is the first episode of our podcast with external guest. We have Rudolf here. Hi Rudolf.
Hello, hello.
Can you please tell a little bit about yourself?
Uh, where do I start? I don't know. I'm a data engineer. Have mostly worked in telcos. I guess it's okay to say where I do work, right?
Yeah, I
I work
guess.
at Telia. Um, so covering different kind of areas, sort of just from building data pipelines. Most recently, quite a bit with generative AI. So yeah, that's about me.
All right, and you
Yes.
mentioned the hype, the buzzword, which is generative AI. Let's start with that. Copilot and stuff. How do you see Copilot changing your life? How do you see Copilot changing developers' life? What's your impression so far?
Uh, so far, yeah, I do use it every now and then. I don't necessarily entirely rely on it myself. I think the sort of problems it can solve are fairly simple ones, and I'm sort of not working with that anymore. I would say that for juniors, it's a bit more useful, but it's great for like generating quick snippets of stuff. Uh, when you say Copilot, though, do you mean just the GitHub Copilot or also the Microsoft Copilot and all that stack?
I mean the class of solutions, whatever is supposed to
Oh,
help you with coding, with bug
yeah,
fixing, with
exactly.
writing tests.
We're writing tests, but then just shooting ideas off at just ChatGPT, does that count as well? Because that's something I actually do more often than the actual code solution. Sort of um, chatting to Bing Chat or ChatGPT about the actual problem I'm solving, sort of as if I would chat to a person and then maybe asking that to give me some code solutions, simple ones. It's probably something I use more often than actually GitHub Copilot. Yeah.
Okay, that's an interesting one because Copilot and things like that they integrate very well with your IDE. You prefer to go
Mm-hmm.
for ChatGPT. Can you please elaborate like why and what kind of problems you are kind of brainstorming with ChatGPT?
So you don't always have colleagues available. You don't have free time. It's sort of just throwing ideas around. Let's say Iceberg right now is sort of one of the more popular open table formats that you can use in a data lake. And you want to play around with things like, how do I sort of implement deletes uh, in a version that does not support a certain like syntax? Like, let's say Iceberg 1.3 did not support match by source syntax. So how would you do that? Uh, and through chatting with ChatGPT, you kind of can arrive at this way of, instead of doing deletes, creating these create, update, delete flags, and then use those eventually for deletes, sort of simulating what match by source or not match by source would actually have done. And I entirely arrived to that solution by essentially chatting ChatGPT.
Okay, and when you ask ChatGPT a question like that, are you asking it to provide you with a ready code, or are you asking for high level idea?
Um, well, I usually start off, I don't ask specifically for code. I start off by just asking for, hey, how would you do this kind of? And it most often will give you like a block of code, and you're like, okay, this might not work for these reasons. Or you start a conversation with it the same way you would speak to like a person next to you in office, really. That's sort of my approach with it.
All right.
And,
And speaking of people next
and
to you, do they actually kind of share your approach to that, or you've seen people who are very, let's say, enthusiastic about a
not in
generative
my
AI
team.
helping them?
Not in my team. Like there are people who don't use it at all. And there are also people who use it quite a bit, but I wouldn't say that they use it. They still write most of the code. They don't use it sort of giving as a source of the final production ready code, kind of more like as boilerplate perhaps, or yeah, and then it's very often like, oh yeah, I have a one developer who more or less has given all the decisions on naming things to ChatGPT. That we also have.
Okay, yeah, I've seen this quite viral LinkedIn post about an engineer seeing
Mhm.
a suggestion from ChatGPT, and the suggestion from ChatGPT was basically wrong because it was using some parameter which didn't exist. So the suggestion from that developer
Mhm.
was to basically change the API so it fits what ChatGPT is providing. So you can go a bit too far with this, right?
No, of
But
course, yeah.
yeah. And one thing you mentioned, which got me curious, is you mentioned that it could be more useful maybe for junior engineers. But do you that's kind of a tricky subject because the
Mhm.
question I often kind of raise to myself, I often hear is it good idea to expose juniors to that as much as possible, or it's actually a trap? So what do you think about that?
I mean, if they're not gonna ask ChatGPT, they're gonna end up copy pasting random stuff from Stack Overflow anyways. So, and I mean, I still do that sometimes. It's not that I don't know what I'm copy pasting, but yeah,
Okay,
I
but
still
how
find myself doing that.
do you have any solution,
Mhm.
any suggestion which about preventing from copy pasting things you don't know what you are copy pasting? Because that's the trap I was referring to, right?
Yeah, well, one thing that some of these solutions are pretty good at is basically you give it like a piece of code and then be like, "Yo, explain this." And for most part, these explanations are actually pretty good. I would say it's actually a lot better at explaining things than generating the code, or rather explaining the code. So,
Yeah,
uh,
that is super good because like that's really one of the challenges with this kind of generative AI tools is that they generate something and they are extremely confident about it. So it's very easy to just believe them even if it's complete nonsense, complete hallucination. Uh,
yeah, it is confident, but then the other end of it is that whoever sort of owns the solution puts enough safety or like rail guards up to the point that it's useless. To every question response, "Oh, sorry, I don't know this actually. Oh, sorry."
yeah, I actually wanted to wrap up this kind of Copilot and stuff
Mhm.
with one more question and one more question about junior people. How do you think it will affect the market in the long term? Do you think it will be the effect of this kind of tools will be very significant, and what kind of roles will be affected the most?
Somebody still has to be able to read and approve the code, um, understand it. So there's definitely going to be it's like developers ain't going to go away. Just and even if you can sort of have it write code, somebody still has to review it, and then you also need people who actually build these AI tools to write the code for someone. So developers are not going to disappear, but I think it's going to make harder is um, for juniors to find jobs for people to actually enter engineering field or software engineering field actually because like if you take a junior and you give him ChatGPT, they can be somewhat productive fairly quickly, and they can probably sort of do what in past maybe you needed four juniors for. So that's going to get them a lot more tricky. Yeah.
But let's talk about it about something a bit less hyped. So everybody is talking about Copilot, Gen AI, ChatGPT, and
Mm-hmm.
so on. But those are the kind of brand new technologies. There are some a bit older, rusty technologies. But how much of the project success is really the technology, and how much is more about the communication between teams and how you organize your work. Can you please share your views on that?
So communication between teams is a big one. So let's say you are using these fancy new technologies, you want to build some Gen AI solution with drag retrieval, whatever, right? Data still has to come from somewhere, has to still be in a shape that you can actually use, that you can chunk and embed and actually make sense doing retrievals and stuff like that. And then you start running into problems, and this is probably like from a real project I might have worked on or not, where you can't even figure out who owns the data to begin with. And then there's a lot of also back and forth about what you're actually allowed to do with this data and not. And you might actually get stuck, not because technology is limiting you, but because, well, first of all, you don't even own your own data, as it turns out. And second is that people don't necessarily understand what you're doing and are very careful about it. And then finally, they might not actually be able to. Yeah, where was I going with this? This will have to cut out.
No, but actually that's a good point. Like knowing where who owns the data, knowing if you can even work with that data for some legal reasons, but also super simple questions like what is the meaning of that column, and sometimes like if the data owner, data producer is somewhere sitting somewhere far away, it's also a tricky question. And like if you try to build a system, whether it's a dashboard or an ML system on top of the data you don't understand, then you might get some confusing results.
Yeah, that is true. And then it might also not even be, the column might actually hold handwritten HTML in the end, written by somebody who does not even know what HTML is to begin with. Yeah, we have seen that.
So how would you suggest to address this kind of problem? So we are aware this kind of problems exist. We are aware that they exist especially in large organizations, but and understanding that it exists is one thing, but addressing is much trickier. So what would be your top 3 or top N suggestions?
Some suggestions, like one thing is that you definitely have to learn what the data is yourself. I've seen plenty of people around that sort of never really care about the data itself. For them, it's, oh, I'm just moving it from here to here, without necessarily understanding what they're trying to do with it and what are the implications of it. And so basically, you do have to, and this only can come with time. Nobody is going to be able to come in and like, yes, I immediately understand this data. So you have to do a lot of data analysis yourself, and not entirely rely on, let's say, data architects or business analysts who are supposed to usually do that job for you beforehand, right? Yeah, there's that. You should also have sort of, and this I guess touches up a bit on, I kind of like data mesh, but you kind of have to have very clear agreements about who uses your data or whose data you use and what they are supposed to deliver by that. So you have to sort of agree on schemas and how they will change and how communication about that is going to happen, things like that.
You mentioned the data mesh. This is very popular subject, but this is often very maybe not misunderstood subject, but subject which people understand differently. So would you mind kind of giving us your definition of what you mean is data mesh and what is the most important about it?
Yeah, but in my opinion, the most important part of sort of data mesh is that you as a team sort of own your data products and you make clear contracts with the consumers about them. So, but yeah, contracts between teams using the data and teams producing the data, teams actually owning the data products, not just creating something and dumping it somewhere. That's probably the most important part of data mesh for me.
Okay, and to what extent this contract is technical things like schema, some check when you deliver the data, and to what extent the contract is more of like agreement between humans.
To what extent? I mean, it's totally important. You sort of need to know who actually depends on your data, right? How else are you going to be able to communicate these technical things otherwise, right? So first comes the contract between humans or organizations or teams or whatever, because that sort of is going to then establish, I guess, the protocol for communicating the technical things.
Well, I'm asking that question for a reason, because I've seen situations when technically you've had at least some sort of limited contract between the systems. The engineers knew they are forced to fulfill the contract, but they had no idea what the data is used for, and that's of course affecting the job of analyst who is analyzing the data, a job of data scientist who is building a model on top of that data. That's why I'm kind of emphasizing the difference. I'm not sure if you've seen this kind of examples.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, no, I've seen these examples. And it goes back to sort of, the same people who sort of never really care what they do. They sort of fulfill just the role of data engineer of like, moving some data from one place to another. And they usually are the cause for the problems.
And actually, like when you're telling about these kind of scenarios, I'm thinking more and more like the more you understand why you are doing why you are doing certain change and why you are moving data from one place to another, the much more involved the people are, even those people who don't care in first place. So when I can give an example from back then when I was working in Spotify, and it was kind of data mesh without calling it data mesh. So I was sitting in the same team as a data engineer, sitting in the same team with backend engineers, with UI guys, and so on. And all the people knew what they are aiming for. All the people knew that they're aiming for the payment funnel conversion. And then it was super easy. I wasn't getting changes I didn't expect. I was getting changes either suggested by the UI and basically agreed with us, or the changes we were requesting the UI people, the people working on the UI. So for instance, if you do some A/B tests on top of like what the UI looks like and whether one will be easier for the users or the others. And if you want to analyze that, you can request explicitly what exactly you need, and all team is pretty much on the same page, and that helps a lot.
Yeah, and I can give you like the example of exact opposite when it sort of doesn't work as a result. And it's sort of, if let's say you have some sort of application, big data application that, a real example would be an NBA engine or next best action sort of engine, where application consumes data from quite a lot of sources, produces quite a lot of data. And in the end, it's supposed to go to some dashboard to sort of monitor it, to visualize it. And all of the teams are working together, except for, let's say, dashboard people. That sort of, in your case, I guess the UI people. And since they are not part of the team, they generally just get these, hey, this is the data, visualize it, thank you, bye, requests. They never really understand what they're trying to visualize. And the dashboards sort of end up kind of useless because they sort of, they throw together the data model, they're not understanding what they're actually modeling, right?
Yeah.
And at that point, you would have been better off without any dashboard people, just doing it yourself, kind of as part of the team.
Okay. So we've been talking about how the generative AI is affecting life of developers, of engineers. But how about like looking at the bigger picture? How about life of everyone? How about the changes in the society? Do you see any huge impact right now, and do you expect something huge in upcoming, let's say, 3 years?
Well, I think as it is right now, it's sort of overhyped a bit, and people attribute it more power and impact than it actually has. And I would guess that's because you kind of have to sell these tools, you have to get investment into it, so you attribute it with mythical powers, right? As it is in the end, it is just a token predictor, right? It predicts what letters or words are going to follow some other words, right? So there is no, it's unable to reason, right? Um, that being said, it can sort of um, speed up quite a lot of sort of menial tasks when it comes to producing text. Let's say that. And that's probably where it's, and it can be used like as a really good tool then to, let's say, create fake news that are actually believable, right? So that's sort of one impact. Other thing is how it sort of can, right now, a lot of work that people do is busy work, sort of only exists so that people would be able to do it, right? It doesn't really serve like a bigger purpose. Those jobs could completely disappear. But overall, I think this sort of first wave is going to change how certain jobs work. Some of them will become a bit more editorial than creative. It's going to sort of slightly change how people consume, let's say, content online. I think search engines is, in my personal opinion, one thing that sort of will change with generative AI. It's going to be more and more generative AI and less about just trying to index and match some results for you. Like you can already sort of see that in Google, like Google provides these short answers that are not always great, but whenever you search for something, these AI generated short answers, right? And you can technically avoid search engines entirely by just using the Bing chat or something. Now it's called Copilot as well. So thank you, Microsoft, for making those things confusing. You can replace that into search entirely with that, which then probably means that advertisement business will have to dramatically change. So I think that's another area that's going to be massively affected by this. But beyond that, I think it is a bit overhyped and it's not going to have that great of an impact right now. I think we're going to have, once the hype dies down, people are going to realize, okay, it's good at these few things, and then we have to wait for the next big thing, same as it happened before.
Yeah, but you mentioned Google, and so you predict that people will be using the search engine in a completely different way. Either the search engine will change itself, or people will shift to tools like ChatGPT. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what I'm kind of saying. I'm saying it's probably going to be a bit of both, because right now I more often actually use ChatGPT than actual search, but that doesn't mean that an average person does it,
Yeah.
right? Most people still go to Google or DuckDuckGo or just regular Bing to search for things. But then how those tools work also changes, right? You don't have to call it AI, right? You just provide more interesting results as part of Google search, right? You get those short versions of pages or summaries, essentially.
Yeah, but all these tools which can generate so good looking text, I believe they are quite a big challenge for Google, because like when the internet is probably flooded these days with tons of articles which was fully or semi-generated by AI, then that means you have much more content, and then the quality of the content very often is kind of questionable, and to keep having the good score and the well working search engine is I believe it's challenging these days. So it's challenging for the big companies to keep up with their products, but it's also challenging for an individual to filter out what's fake and what's completely irrelevant, even though it looks good. So
But do you remember, like maybe about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, we suddenly had this like massive um, amount of like, let's say you search for a specific technical thing, like maybe you want to find just the, I don't know, Scala docs or something, and what you would be sort of flame, what you would get is actually like first five results or something would be these completely AI generated fake tech websites that would sort of give you like answers. No, but that was the thing. So it was actually very hard to find the real documentation of the project you're trying to sort of find the documentation of. First, you will get sparked by example, things like that, like sites that are entirely sort of.
Oh yeah, now I recall it. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And for a while, it was basically making Google unusable for these kind of things, right? But sort of, they also sort of, I guess, have adapted how they rank results, and now it's not such a big problem, is it? So it's kind of like a similar problem where it's like, oh, if all art is now created by Stable Diffusion and things like that, right? Where is there art anymore? But you can kind of you can tell that what's AI generated and not, or you can create models that try to evaluate what has been AI generated and not, and it kind of gives the real thing more value in the end, because
yeah, and the way I mean, on one hand, it's much easier for to get kind of good looking content. Let's say I'm creating a presentation which doesn't have to be perfect. It's much easier for me to generate this kind of content. But on the other hand, I was talking to people who are graphic designers, and it completely changed their way of working, because they also use these tools because they can very quickly show, I don't know, 10 prototypes and see at least which direction to go into. But one more thing, when you mentioned this kind of fake websites, I just recalled that for a very long time I have not been on the Stack Overflow page, on the Stack Overflow website, and yeah, that's a bit weird, because before it was like when you're searching for technical things, you always end up there, and yeah, you have to know what you are copying from there, but it was kind of super useful. But that website seems to be killed by ChatGPT and similar tools.
I'm not sure if it has been killed. It still exists, and I still eventually land there. But
yeah, let's say hit hard. At least that's my impression.
Yeah, it is probably hit hard. Yeah, exactly. And then that's the other thing, is that same way these Google like summaries, when you search how to pet a cat, and you will get like 6 summaries of like different ways to pet a cat from Google. I guess a lot of people will never actually go to the results site. They would be sort of satisfied with just the answer by these summaries. So as a result, less people would actually go to the Stack Overflow, for instance, and that would also de-rank it, perhaps.
Okay. So let's say we sum it up with the changes you expect in the future. What in the you're quite skeptical, as you said, but which areas will be affected? Which businesses will be affected the most within, I don't know, the upcoming, let's say, short term, 3 years?
Yeah, well, advertisement for sure. It's probably going to change how people search for things and how you are able to feed them content. But it's also going to change things like how copywriters will be more editors than actually content creators. So they would be like, okay, my target audience is 40-year-old white men that need to buy chainsaws. Write me a copy, and you would get like a copy, and then they as editors would be either approving it or altering it. So I think that industry is going to be affected in many different ways. It's going to make certain tasks easier, but it's also going to change entirely how advertisement, probably online, works. But I'm a bit biased, since I've been mostly working with marketing technologies in the past 2 years. So that's where I sort of see this technology enter. I mean, yeah. So another area where I can sort of see the impact, I suppose, is going to be with expert sort of systems where you can have a LLM as a router that sort of routes questions to relevant experts. And if you add sort of skills, I think they are called in past, like let's say Alexa used to have or the skill system, and a lot of these home assistant kind of tools have this idea that you can define a skill that you can then use, like, oh, what's the weather, and it's going to use this skill to find weather, or turn the music up or something like that, or query Google for me, or query like all the search engines. And if you sort of build more advanced systems on top of that, then I think that can have pretty good impact on things like I think we'll see something coming from Apple with HomeKit that regard and Siri, and I think it's also going to come to Google Home. Sort of more sophisticated automation powered by sort of these expert systems where you can sort of add much more useful, complicated skills than before, which sort of go above and beyond, like open the blinds, right? And
okay, so nowadays the way it works is like, "Hi Siri, what's the weather?" Oh my God!
yeah.
I hope she is not replying it now because I'm recording on an iPhone. But this is the state of the art today, right?
Yeah.
I don't expect that anytime soon it will make you a breakfast. So what will be the thing in the middle? What do you expect that will be?
I think it's going to be better at. It's going to be better at. So you will be able to create more sort of complicated tasks that is goes beyond weather. It could be. It can sort of interpret. It could be even like just more complicated question about the weather. It could be about but what was the weather like today a year ago, kind of, and how does it compare to today?
Okay.
So
do my shoppings, the regular ones.
They do my shopping. One is obvious one, but you don't need fancy LLMs for that. I guess what does change is sort of the interface between the human and like the automatic shopping thing. It gives you a bit more human, sort of more conversation-like solution.
Yeah, but you say do my shopping is kind of obvious one. You don't need fancy LLMs. But when you look at what Alexa can do, it can kind of redo the last purchase. But when you try to control it with the voice for something more complex, it's not there yet.
So yeah, it could improve that, and it would be able to sort of, in a very broad even of expert systems, just create something that can be good at many tasks, not just, oh, I'm only good at shopping. You could have like, yeah, a bunch of smaller sort of AIs that are, oh, I'm good at shopping, I'm good at providing weather, I'm good at searching Google, I'm good at drawing pictures for your kids or something, and I'm good at like coming up with excuses why I will not be, or I'll be late again for the meeting, kind of, right? And I think that's going to be an interesting area. But yeah.
That's perfect. Thanks a lot.
Oh, thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.